The Valdran Empire stretched across more than 200 star systems and had never known defeat in 3,000 years of expansion. Their ships moved through space like silver daggers, and their warriors were trained from birth to conquer. Every species that encountered them either bent the knee or faced total destruction. There had never been a third option until now. Ambassador Kyle Henderson stood in the Grand Council chamber of the Galactic Assembly and felt the weight of countless eyes upon him. He was the first human to ever stand in this place, and he could sense the mixture of curiosity and dismissal in the alien gazes around him. The chamber itself was enormous, with crystalline walls that seemed to capture and reflect starlight from the void beyond. Hundreds of species were represented here, but none of them looked at humanity with respect. The delegate from Earth may speak, announced the council arbiter through a translation device that made the words sound hollow and mechanical. Kyle stepped forward and kept his expression calm even though his heart pounded in his chest. Beside him stood Dr. Amy Carson, who carried data files about human civilization, and Colonel Brandon Wright, whose military bearing showed years of combat experience. They were humanity's best chance at making a good first impression. Honored members of the Galactic Assembly, Kyle began, and his voice echoed through the vast chamber. Humanity comes before you seeking peaceful relations and mutual cooperation. Our people have only recently developed faster than light travel, but we are eager to learn from older civilizations and contribute what we can to galactic society. A harsh clicking sound interrupted him, and Kyle turned to see a massive reptilian figure rising from one of the elevated platforms. The being stood nearly 3 meters tall, with scales that gleamed like polished obsidian and eyes that burned with cold calculation. This was Emperor Threvkar of the Valdran Empire, and his presence commanded immediate attention. Peaceful relations? The Emperor's voice dripped with contempt as it came through the translators. Your species has barely left its cradle world, and you dare to address this assembly as equals. The Valdran Empire has studied your pathetic civilization and found it wanting in every measure. Amy Carson's hand tightened on her datapad, but she remained silent. Brandon Wright's jaw clenched, but he too kept his composure. Kyle knew they had expected this kind of reception, but hearing it spoken so bluntly still stung. We do not claim to be your equals in technology or reach, Kyle responded carefully. But we believe all sentient species deserve respect and the chance to grow. Humanity has much to learn, but we also have perspectives that might prove valuable. Perspectives? Another voice joined the conversation, and Kyle saw a slender blue-skinned alien stand from the diplomatic corps section. Your world barely qualifies as hostile by galactic standards. Your gravity is moderate, and your climate is comfortable. You have not faced the true challenges that forge strong civilizations. Kyle felt a flicker of anger, but suppressed it quickly. These aliens had no idea what humanity had survived to reach this point. Ages in mass extinctions and wars that had nearly destroyed their species, but explaining that now would sound like desperate boasting. Emperor Threvkar gestured dismissively, and a holographic display appeared above the center of the chamber. It showed Earth rotating slowly in space with tactical data streaming alongside the image. Kyle's blood ran cold as he realized what he was seeing, a military threat assessment. Your planet's location, the Emperor announced to the entire assembly, sits in a strategic junction between 3 major trade routes. The Valdran Empire has need of this location for our continued expansion. We are willing to offer your species client state status under our protection. Client state? Brandon Wright spoke for the first time, and his voice carried an edge of steel. You mean subjugation. We mean survival. Commander Rick still rose beside the Emperor, and his scaled face twisted into what might have been a smile. Your Earth has approximately 12 billion inhabitants and minimal defensive capabilities. Our fleet numbers over 10,000 warships. This is not a negotiation of equals. It is a statement of reality. The chamber erupted in murmurs, and Kyle could see that many of the assembled species were uncomfortable with the Valdrin's directness. But none spoke up in humanity's defense. They had all learned long ago that opposing the Empire brought only pain. Amy leaned close to Kyle and whispered urgently, "Their assessment is based on our public military data. They have no idea about our classified defense systems." "It won't matter," Kyle whispered back. "Even with everything we have hidden, we're still outmatched by their numbers." Emperor Thravekur raised one clawed hand, and silence fell across the chamber immediately. His authority was absolute, and everyone present knew it. Kyle felt the weight of history pressing down on him. Whatever he said next could determine humanity's future for generations. "We require your answer within 30 standard days," the Emperor declared with finality in his voice. "Surrender your world peacefully, and your people will be integrated into our empire with minimal disruption. Refuse, and we will take what we need by force. Those who resist will serve as examples to others who might consider defiance." Kyle took a deep breath and made his choice. He could accept these terms and buy Earth some time, or he could reject them and ensure immediate war. But there was a third option that none of these aliens seemed to consider. Humanity could fight and win. The people of Earth, Kyle said clearly so every being in the chamber could hear, "We'll consider your offer and deliver our response within the specified time frame. However, I must warn this assembly that humanity does not respond well to threats." "Threats?" Thravekur laughed, and the sound was like grinding stone. "You primitive species mistake a statement of fact for a threat. You have 30 days, use them wisely." The Emperor turned and swept from the chamber with his entourage following behind. Other species began filing out as well, and Kyle could hear their conversations. Most assumed Earth would surrender. A few wondered if humanity would try to fight. None believed humans stood any real chance against the Empire. Brandon Wright moved close to Kyle and Amy as the chamber emptied around them. His expression was grim, but his eyes held something else, a cold calculation that came from decades of military planning. "We need to send a priority message to Earth Command immediately," Brandon said quietly. "They need to know the Valdrins are moving their fleet into position." "They already know," Kyle replied and pulled out his secure communicator. "I sent a warning signal the moment Thravekur started his threat assessment." Amy Carson looked between the two men and saw something in their expressions that made her pause. They weren't defeated or afraid. They were planning something. "What aren't you telling me?" she asked carefully. Kyle and Brandon exchanged a glance before Kyle answered. "Amy, how many species in this galaxy do you think have actually studied human history in detail? Based on their dismissive attitudes?" Amy considered the question. "Probably none of them." "Exactly," Brandon agreed, and now there was definitely something dangerous in his smile. "They see our comfortable climate and moderate gravity and assume we're soft. They have no idea what Earth really is." Kyle nodded slowly and activated his communicator. The message he composed was brief, but it would tell Earth Command everything they needed to know about the situation. He typed 4 words that would change the course of galactic history. "They think we're weak." The message transmitted instantly across the light years, and Kyle knew that back on Earth military planners were already moving into action. The Valdrin Empire had made one critical mistake. They had underestimated humanity based on surface observations. They would learn the truth soon enough. "Let's go home," Kyle said to his companions. "We have a war to prepare for." The 3 humans left the Galactic Assembly and began their journey back to Earth. Behind them, the various species gossiped and speculated about humanity's fate. The consensus was clear: Earth would surrender or be destroyed within months. None of them understood that they had just witnessed the beginning of the Valdrin Empire's downfall. The Empire had conquered hundreds of worlds and crushed countless civilizations. But they had never faced a species like humanity before humans, who had clawed their way up from primitive hunters to spacefaring civilization against impossible odds. Humans who had survived everything their brutal home world had thrown at them. Humans who had learned one simple truth through millions of years of evolution: never stop. Fighting, never surrender, never give up. The Emperor thought humanity was weak, and that mistake would cost the Valdran Empire everything. The Valdran Armada emerged from faster than light, traveled at the edge of the Sol system, and their ships gleamed like a swarm of metallic locusts against the black of space. Admiral Krevnos stood on the bridge of his flagship and studied the tactical displays with satisfaction. 3 small mining colonies orbited the outer planets, and none showed any significant defensive capabilities. Transmit surrender demands to all 3 stations. The Admiral ordered, and his subordinates moved to comply immediately. This would be the easiest conquest in Valdran history, and Krevnos would add another victory to his already impressive record. On Europa Station, Lisa Morgan received the transmission and felt her blood turn to ice. She was the station commander and responsible for 247 miners and their families. The Valdran message was brief and brutal: surrender within 1 hour or face complete annihilation. Commander Morgan. Her second-in-command, Marcus Webb, spoke urgently from across the control room. We need to evacuate. We can't fight a Valdran warship with mining equipment. Lisa looked at the tactical screen and saw the massive vessel holding position just outside weapons range. Marcus was right from a logical standpoint, but something inside her refused to accept that logic. These miners had come to Europa seeking a better life, and now aliens were demanding they abandon everything. No, Lisa said firmly, and her voice carried across the control room. We're not leaving. Marcus stared at her in shock. Lisa, we'll all die. Maybe. Lisa agreed and turned to face her crew. But I'm tired of running from bullies. Earth taught us to stand our ground, and that's exactly what we're going to do. Anyone who wants to evacuate can take the emergency shuttles. I won't stop you. The control room fell silent as the miners processed her words. These were tough people who had chosen to work in one of the harshest environments in the solar system. They knew about hardship and danger. Slowly, one by one, they returned to their stations. Looks like we're staying, Marcus said with a grim smile. So what's the plan? Lisa pulled up the station schematics on her display and began working through possibilities. Europa Station wasn't designed for combat, but it had tools that could be adapted. Mining lasers, powerful enough to cut through ice kilometers thick. Explosive charges used for excavation. Industrial chemicals stored in bulk quantities. We turned this station into a death trap, Lisa announced and pointed to key locations on the schematic. Marcus, you take a team and rig the mining lasers to target the docking ports. If they board us, they'll be walking into focused energy beams on the Valdran flagship Admiral. Krevnos frowned as the time limit expired without any response from the human stations. He had expected immediate surrender. This silence was unexpected and mildly annoying. Send assault teams to all 3 stations, he ordered with irritation in his voice. Capture the facilities intact if possible, but eliminate any resistance. The boarding craft launched from the Valdran warships and accelerated toward their targets. Each carried 50 elite soldiers, armed with plasma weapons and protected by advanced armor. They had conducted thousands of similar operations, and this one should be routine. The first boarding craft attached itself to Europa Station's main airlock and began cutting through the outer doors. Inside the craft, the Valdran soldiers checked their weapons and prepared to storm through. Their briefing had described humans as weak and poorly trained. This would be over quickly. The airlock doors exploded inward, and the Valdran soldiers rushed through expecting minimal resistance. Instead, they found themselves in a corridor filled with superheated steam that their sensors couldn't penetrate. The temperature was high enough to damage their equipment and disorient. Their thermal imaging. Advance carefully. The team leader ordered, but his words were cut off as the floor beneath 3 soldiers suddenly gave way. They fell into a shaft filled with industrial acid, and their screams echoed through the communications. Channel Marcus Webb watched from a hidden observation post as the Valdrons stumbled into trap after trap. The mining crew had spent the last hour preparing these corridors, and every meter was lethal. Pressure doors that sealed and then vented atmosphere into space. Power cables, rigged to electrocute anything that touched them. Automated mining drones reprogrammed to attack movement. They're trying to flank through Corridor B. One of the miners reported over the communication system. Activate the drilling rig. Marcus responded calmly. In Corridor B, the Valdron soldiers advanced cautiously after witnessing what happened to their comrades. They moved in formation, with weapons ready and expected ambush at any moment. What they didn't expect was for the entire corridor to suddenly fill with rapidly spinning drill bits. The mining equipment had been designed to bore through Europa's thick ice crust, and the Valdron armor provided no protection against the industrial cutters. The screams lasted only seconds before the corridor fell silent again. On the flagship, Admiral Krevnos stared at his displays in growing disbelief. The first assault team had been wiped out completely. The second team at Titan Station was reporting similar problems. The third team at Ganymede had managed to penetrate deeper, but was taking heavy casualties from improvised traps. How is this possible? He demanded of his tactical officer. These are mining stations, not military installations. The humans are using their industrial equipment as weapons, the officer explained nervously. Our intelligence reports did not account for this level of creativity. Creativity? Krevno snarled. They're primitive savages fighting with tools. Send more troops and overwhelm them with numbers. But sending more troops only resulted in more casualties. Lisa Morgan had turned Europa Station into a maze of death, and the Valdrons were dying faster than they could advance. She watched the tactical displays and felt a fierce pride in her crew. They're pulling back, Marcus announced from his position. We hurt them bad. Lisa nodded but knew this was only temporary. The Valdrons would regroup and return with heavier weapons. But humanity had sent a message: we don't surrender easily. Across the outer system, the 3 mining stations had inflicted casualties that shocked the Valdron military. Over 40% of the initial assault forces were dead or wounded. Emperor Drevker received the reports aboard his personal dreadnought and felt something he rarely experienced doubt. How many humans defended these stations? He asked Commanders Riksdal. Each station had between 200 and 300 personnel. Zriksdal replied while studying the casualty reports. Mostly civilian miners with no formal military training. And they killed over 2,000 of our elite soldiers? The Emperor's voice rose with anger. This is unacceptable. The humans fought with desperation and cunning. Zriksdal tried to explain. They used every resource available and showed no fear of death. Threvkor slammed his clawed fist against the armrest of his command throne. Then, we will show them what true desperation looks like. Prepare them. Bombardment fleets, if they won't surrender their stations, will simply destroy them. On Earth, Captain Eric Stone monitored the battle reports from the outer colonies and felt his chest tighten with emotion. Those miners had bought humanity. Precious time, but the cost would be high. The Valdrons were moving bombardment ships into position. Sir, his communications officer reported, we're receiving a final transmission from Europa Station. Lisa Morgan's face appeared on the screen, and Eric could see the determination in her eyes. Behind her, the station's alarms were blaring and red emergency lights flashed. Captain Stone, Lisa said clearly, we held them as long as we could. The Valdrons are about to destroy this station, but we don't regret our choice. Tell Earth that humans don't bow to tyrants. Tell them. The transmission cut off as the Valdrum bombardment began. Europa Station and its two sister facilities vanished in bursts of plasma fire that lit up the outer system like brief stars. 2,000 humans died in those explosions, but their sacrifice had already changed the course of the war on. The Valdrum flagship Admiral Krevnos felt hollow victory as he watched the stations burn. Yes, the humans were dead, but the cost had been far higher than predicted. He had lost thousands of soldiers, capturing 3 mining stations. What would happen when they reached Earth itself with its billions of inhabitants? Send a message to the Emperor. Krevnos ordered quietly. Inform him that human resistance was significantly stronger than anticipated. Recommend we commit additional forces before engaging their home world. But Emperor Threvker was already past the point of listening. To caution. The deaths of his soldiers had enraged him, and he demanded immediate action. The full might of the Valdron Empire would descend on Earth and crush this upstart species once and for all. In orbit above Earth, Commander Nicole Patterson stood on the bridge of the defense frigate Defiant and watched the tactical displays with grim determination. She commanded one of only 20 warships in humanity's deep space fleet. The Valdron Armada approaching numbered over 400 vessels, ma'am. Her tactical officer reported. Long-range sensors confirm the Valdron main fleet is entering the inter-system. Enemy ship count is 432. Nicole took a deep breath and thought about Lisa Morgan and all the miners who had died defending their homes. Those people had been civilians with no military training, but they had fought like warriors. Now it was time. Commander Nicole Patterson felt the Defiant shudder as the ship accelerated to combat speed, and the inertial dampeners struggled to compensate for the massive G-forces. Around her, the bridge crew worked their stations with practiced efficiency, even though they all knew the odds were against them. Valdron fleet is adjusting formation. Lieutenant Jake Foster reported from the engineering station. They're spreading out to envelop us standard Imperial tactics. Nicole studied the tactical display and saw exactly what Jake described. The Valdron commander was confident enough to use textbook maneuvers. 400 ships moving to surround and destroy 20 human vessels. It should have been a simple execution. All ships maintain current heading. Nicole ordered across the fleet channel. Wait for my signal before breaking formation on the Valdron flagship. Admiral Krevnos watched the human ships approach and felt puzzled by their tactics. The small fleet was flying directly into his trap. Either they were incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. He suspected the latter. Human vessels are not attempting evasive maneuvers. His tactical officer reported with confusion in his voice. They appear to be committing to a frontal assault. Then they will die quickly. Krevnos replied, but something about the situation bothered him. After witnessing the fierce resistance at the mining stations, he had expected more cunning from these humans. The distance between the two fleets shrank rapidly and weapons range approached. Krevnos prepared to give the order to fire when suddenly the human ships scattered in 20 different directions at speeds that made his sensors spike with alarm. They're pulling 12G acceleration. The tactical officer shouted in disbelief. That's impossible. Their crews should be crushed. But the humans weren't crushed because they came from Eartha, world with gravity higher than 70% of inhabited planets in the galaxy. Human bodies had evolved under that constant pressure, and their cardiovascular systems were built to withstand forces that would kill most species. Nicole felt the G-forces slam into her body as the Defiant pushed past safe limits. Her vision tunneled, and every breath became an effort, but she stayed conscious and kept commanding her ship. Beside her, Jake Foster monitored the engines and watched readouts climb into the red zone. Hull stress at 95%. Jake called out, but he was grinning despite the danger. Engine temperature exceeding design specifications. Keep pushing, Nicole ordered through gritted teeth. We only need 30 more seconds. The Defiant dove toward a cluster of Valdron. Cruisers and the enemy ships tried to track the small human vessel, but their targeting computers couldn't match the erratic movements. Nicole was flying by instinct, using reflexes honed by millions of years of predator ancestors chasing prey across Earth's plains. Weapons range in 5 seconds. Her tactical officer announced, "Fire everything." Nicole commanded. The Defiant's railguns opened up and sent solid projectiles screaming through space at relativistic speeds. The Valdron shields were designed to stop energy weapons, but physical mass traveling at a significant fraction of light speed simply punched through. 3 cruisers exploded as the projectiles tore through their reactor cores. Across the battle space, the other 19 human ships were conducting similar attacks. They moved through the Valdron formation like wolves hunting among sheep. Their smaller size and incredible acceleration made them nearly impossible to target. Effectively, Admiral Krevnos watched in growing horror as his carefully organized fleet descended into chaos. Human ships were everywhere at once, and his vessels kept exploding. The casualties were mounting faster than he could process. "Focus fire on individual targets," he ordered desperately. "Concentrate our forces and eliminate them one at a time." But focusing fire required the Valdron ships to slow down and maintain formation. The moment they did, the human vessels exploited the gaps. Nicole saw 3 Valdron destroyers cluster together and immediately recognized the opportunity. "Hard burn toward heading 275, she ordered. "Jake, I need everything the engines can give." "You'll have it," Jake replied and manually overrode the safety protocols. The Defiant's engines screamed in protest, but the ship shot forward like a missile. The 3 Valdron destroyers detected the incoming human ship and turned their weapons to intercept. Plasma bolts and particle beams filled the space between them, but Nicole was already changing course. She flew the Defiant through the weapon's fire with a precision that bordered on supernatural. Dr. Ryan Mitchell sat in the Defiant's medical bay and monitored the crew's vital signs. As the ship's chief medical officer, he knew exactly what was happening to their bodies under these extreme conditions. Their hearts were racing, and their blood pressure was dangerously high, but they were holding together. "Commander Patterson's heart rate is at 180 beats per minute, his assistant reported with worry. "Should we recommend she ease off the acceleration?" Ryan shook his head. "She's from Earth. Our bodies can handle this for short periods. The Valdrons probably think we're dying up there." He pulled up comparative physiology data on his screen and smiled grimly. Valdron soldiers came from low-gravity worlds, and their species had evolved in relatively gentle environments. They could tolerate maybe 4 or 5 Gs before losing consciousness. Humans regularly survived car crashes that pulled 15 Gs for brief moments. Back on the bridge, Nicole lined up her final attack run. The 3 Valdron destroyers were perfectly positioned, and she had one chance to make this count. The Defiant carried 4 nuclear torpedoes, weapons that most galactic species considered too dangerous and unstable for regular use. "Arm all torpedoes," Nicole ordered. "Set for proximity detonation." "Torpedoes armed," her weapons officer confirmed. "Firing solution locked." "Fire." The 4 torpedoes launched and streaked toward their targets. The Valdron point defense systems managed to destroy 3 of them, but the 4th slipped through and detonated between the clustered destroyers. The nuclear explosion lit up space like a miniature sun, and all 3 Valdron ships vanished in the blast. Admiral Krevnos felt his flagship rock from nearby explosions and realized with cold certainty that his fleet was losing. These humans fought with a ferocity and skill that defied all intelligence reports. They pulled maneuvers that should have been impossible and used weapons that should have been too dangerous to deploy. "All ships retreat to Rally Point Gamma," he ordered, and hated himself for the command. "We need to regroup and reassess." The Valdron fleet began withdrawing in disorder, and Nicole pursued them mercilessly. She had lost 6 ships and their crews, but the Valdrons had lost over 50 vessels. The exchange ratio was devastating for an empire used to easy victories. Should we continue pursuit? Jake asked from his station. Nicole considered it but shook her head. Let them run. We need to rearm and repair. They'll be back, but now they know what they're facing. The human fleet regrouped near Mars and damage reports came in. The surviving ships were battered, and several would need extensive repairs. But they had accomplished something remarkable. They had faced impossible odds and survived. On Earth, President Rebecca Walsh watched the battle footage and felt tears stream down her face. Those 20 ships and their crews had bought humanity time to prepare. The Valdrons would return with even larger forces, but now Earth knew they could be beaten. Madam President, a military advisor, Colonel Brandon Wright, spoke quietly. We need to address the nation. The people need to know what's coming. Rebecca nodded and composed herself. Within an hour, she was broadcasting to the entire planet. 12 billion humans watched as their president explained the situation with brutal honesty. The Valdron Empire has attacked our outer colonies and killed thousands of our people, Rebecca said, and her voice was steady despite the weight of her words. They have offered us a choice: surrender or die, but I believe there is a third option. She paused and looked directly into the camera. We can fight. We can show the galaxy that humanity does not bow to tyranny. We come from Earth, a world that has tried to kill US for millions of years through ice ages and mass extinctions and diseases that claimed billions. Our ancestors survived all of it, and now we face a new challenge. The president's expression hardened with resolve. The Valdron Empire thinks we're weak because we only recently reached the stars. They judge us by our technology and find us lacking, but they don't understand what makes us strong. We survived on a death world where everything from the weather to the wildlife tried to destroy us. We are persistence hunters who ran our prey to destinies. Exhaustion across continents. We are tool users who turned our environment into weapons. We are social creatures who stand together against any threat. Rebecca leaned forward and her voice grew intense. Every adult human is hereby called to service. We will defend our world with everything we have. Our scientists will develop new weapons. Our engineers will build defenses. Our military will train every volunteer. And when the Valdrons return, they will discover that humanity's greatest strength isn't our technology. She paused for effect. It's our refusal to ever give up. The broadcast ended, and across Earth, people began mobilizing. Factories converted to weapons production. Scientists worked around the clock on new technologies. Millions of civilians volunteered for military training. Humanity was preparing for total war. The emergency council chamber deep beneath the surface of Earth hummed with urgent activity as military commanders and civilian leaders gathered to face humanity's greatest crisis. President Rebecca Walsh stood at the head of the massive circular table and looked at the faces of those who would decide Earth's fate. We have 6 days before the Valdron Grand Fleet arrives. She began without preamble. Our intelligence estimates over 3,000 enemy warships. Colonel Wright, what are our chances in a straight fight? Brandon Wright stood and activated the holographic display at the center of the table. The numbers were brutal, and everyone in the room understood immediately. We currently have 63 combat-capable vessels. Brandon stated flatly, even with the advantage we demonstrated in the last engagement, we would be overwhelmed by sheer numbers within hours. A straight fight means Earth falls. The room fell silent as people processed the harsh reality. Then Dr. Kevin Barnes raised his hand. The young scientist had only recently joined the Defense Council, but his work on adaptive weapons systems had impressed everyone. What if we don't fight straight? Kevin asked and moved to the display. The Valdrons have been studying us, but we've been studying them too. They have tactical patterns that haven't changed in centuries, because those patterns always worked until now. Go on. Rebecca urged. Kevin manipulated the holographic display and showed Valdron fleet movements from their previous encounters. He highlighted weaknesses that became apparent when analyzed closely. The Valdrons rely heavily on numerical superiority and coordinated fire, Kevin explained. Their ships operate in strict formation because their doctrine emphasizes overwhelming force, but that makes them predictable. Brandon Wright leaned forward with interest. You're suggesting we turn their strength into a weakness? Exactly, Kevin confirmed. We can't match their numbers, but we can match their tactics. We make them think we're fighting the way they expect, and then change the rules when they're committed. Ashley Morgan entered the chamber at that moment. She was Lisa Morgan's younger sister and had requested transfer to Earth's Defense Forces after her sister's death at Europa Station. Her expression carried the weight of loss, but also fierce determination. Pilot Morgan reporting as requested. Ashley said crisply. Rebecca gestured for her to join the table. Ashley, you flew combat missions during the first engagement. What's your assessment of Valdron pilots? Ashley considered the question carefully. They're skilled and well-trained, but they follow doctrine rigidly. They don't improvise well under pressure. Human pilots have an advantage in situations that require split-second decisions, because we evolved as hunters. Brandon interjected. Our brains are wired for tracking moving targets and predicting behavior. Every human. Whoever threw a spear at running prey was using calculus they didn't even know existed. Dr. Amy Carson spoke up from her position near the back of the room. The xenobiologist had returned from the Galactic assembly with Kyle Henderson and had spent the last week analyzing every piece of data about the Valdrons. I've been studying their biology and psychology, Amy said while pulling up her research. The Valdrons evolved on a low-gravity world with minimal predation. They're apex beings who never had to fight for survival the way we did. Their entire civilization is based on the assumption of superiority, which means they don't adapt well when that assumption is challenged. Rebecca concluded. The pieces were coming together into a plan. Humanity couldn't win through brute force, but they could win through cunning and exploitation of enemy weaknesses. Earth would become one massive trap designed to break the Valdron fleet. Over the next 6 days, every human on the planet contributed to the war effort. The asteroid belt was seeded with thousands of autonomous weapon platforms. Orbital defense satellites were positioned at strategic points. The space around Earth became a maze of hidden threats. Dr. Kevin Barnes worked with teams of engineers to develop new weapons based on captured Valdron technology. They discovered that Valdron shields were optimized against energy weapons, but vulnerable to rapid kinetic impacts. Human railguns became even more lethal. Michelle Park coordinated communications across the entire defense network. As Chief Communications Officer, she ensured every ship and every platform could share targeting data in real time. The Valdrons relied on centralized command, but humanity would fight as a distributed network. In orbit, Commander Nicole Patterson drilled her expanded fleet relentlessly. New crews learned to push their ships past safe limits. Veteran pilots shared techniques for extreme maneuvering. Everyone understood that surviving the coming battle meant embracing tactics that would terrify most species. Remember, Nicole told her pilots during a briefing, the Valdrons expect us to break when they bring overwhelming force. They think we'll panic and scatter. Instead, we're going to give them exactly what they expect, and then we're going to show them what a death world species looks like when we're defending our home. Ashley Morgan sat in her fighter cockpit and ran through pre-flight checks. She had volunteered for the most dangerous assignment, leading a squadron in close-range attacks against Valdron capital ships. It was essentially a suicide mission, but Ashley didn't care. She was fighting for her sister's memory. Ambassador Kyle Henderson wasn't on Earth. He had returned to the Galactic Assembly with a different mission. If humanity was going to fight, they needed to ensure the rest of the galaxy understood why. Honored delegates. Kyle spoke to the assembled species. In 6 days, the Valdran Empire will attack Earth with 3,000 warships. They will try to exterminate humanity for the crime of refusing subjugation. The chamber was quiet as Kyle continued. I stand before you not to beg for help, he said, and his voice carried across the vast space. Humanity will fight alone if necessary, but I want you all to witness what happens when you underestimate a species from a death world. I want you to see what humans become when you threaten our families. Emperor Thravker wasn't present, but Commander Zrixtal stood and spoke with contempt. Your bravado is admirable, but meaningless in 1 week. Earth will be a cautionary tale about the price of defiance. Kyle met the commander's gaze steadily. Perhaps the Valdran Empire will learn that strength isn't just about numbers and technology. It's about will and determination, and humanity has survived things that would have destroyed your species. He turned to address the entire assembly. You all judge us by our short time in space and assume we're weak, but you know nothing about Earth. Nothing about what we survived to reach this point. Our world tried to kill us through ice ages that lasted thousands of years, through volcanic eruptions that blocked out the sun, through diseases that claimed billions. Kyle's voice grew stronger. We survived by refusing to quit, by adapting to every challenge, by standing together when everything else failed. And now the Valdran Empire thinks they can break us with ships and weapons. There. About to learn the truth, the assembly listened and many delegates felt uncomfortable. Kyle Henderson wasn't pleading or negotiating. He was delivering a warning back on Earth. The final preparations were complete. Every weapon platform was armed and positioned. Every ship was crewed and ready. Every volunteer had been trained as best as possible in the limited time available. President Rebecca Walsh addressed the planet one final time. My fellow humans, she said, and her voice reached every person on Earth. In a few hours, the Valdran fleet will arrive. They come to destroy us, to make us slaves or corpses. But we are going to show them what humans really are. She paused and let her words sink in. Our ancestors survived the ice and the fire. They survived predators with claws and teeth. They survived starvation and disease, and they passed their strength down to us through our very genes. We are the descendants of survivors, and tonight we prove that humanity cannot be broken. The Valdran Grand Fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the solar system, and the sight was terrifying. 3,000 warships spread across space like a metallic storm. Emperor Thravker himself commanded from his massive dreadnought. Begin the advance, he ordered, and the fleet moved forward in perfect formation. The Valdran sensors detected the human defense fleet, and tactical displays showed only 70 ships opposing them. The Emperor smiled coldly. The humans had mustered barely any resistance. This would be over quickly. But as the Valdran fleet advanced deeper into the system, strange readings began appearing on their sensors. The asteroid belt showed unusual energy signatures. Orbital space around Earth was cluttered with objects that shouldn't be there. My Emperor, the tactical officer reported with confusion. We're detecting thousands of small platforms throughout the system. Decoys. Thravker dismissed the concern. The humans are trying to make their forces seem larger, ignore them, and focus on the primary targets. That was his second mistake. The first was attacking Earth at all. Nicole Patterson watched the massive Valdran fleet approach and felt no fear, only cold calculation. They had drawn the Empire into humanity's home. Territory where every advantage belonged to the defenders. All units hold position. She transmitted across the network. Wait for them to reach the kill zone. The Valdran fleet pushed forward confidently and crossed the invisible line that marked the point of no return. Emperor Thravker prepared to order the final assault when 3 months had passed since the Battle of Earth began, and the Valdran Grand Fleet was no longer a fleet at all. It was scattered wreckage drifting through the solar system. Over 2,000 ships destroyed and 500 more disabled. The remainder trapped in orbit around Mars, with their supply lines cut and their escape routes blocked. Emperor Threvkor sat in his command throne and stared at displays showing the catastrophic losses. His invincible armada had been broken by a species he had dismissed as primitive. Every assumption he had made about humanity had been proven wrong in the most brutal way possible. "My Emperor," Commander Zrixtel spoke quietly, "we are receiving another transmission from the humans." Threvkor wanted to ignore it but knew he couldn't. His empire was collapsing, and he needed to understand how this had happened. The holographic display activated and Ambassador Kyle Henderson appeared. The human diplomat looked tired, but his eyes held no mercy. "Emperor Threvkor." Kyle began without any formal greeting. "Your fleet is trapped, and your empire is dying. Your subject worlds are already declaring independence because they see your weakness. You have one chance to salvage something from this disaster." Emperor's claws dug into his armrest, but he forced himself to listen. "Surrender unconditionally." Kyle continued. "Your surviving ships and crew will be treated according to galactic conventions. Resist further, and we will destroy every vessel you have left." "You dare threaten me?" Threvkor snarled. "The Valdran Empire has stood for 3,000 years, and it will fall today unless you accept reality." Kyle interrupted with steel in his voice. "You attacked humanity believing we were weak. That mistake has already cost you everything. Don't compound it by throwing away more lives." The transmission ended and Threvkor sat in silence. Around him, his bridge crew waited for orders, but everyone knew the truth. They had lost. Commander Nicole Patterson floated in zero gravity aboard the Defiant and reviewed the latest tactical reports. Her ship had taken severe damage during the fighting, but Jake Foster and his engineering team had kept it operational. They had lost 17 more ships during the 3-month campaign, but humanity had won. "Commander," Jake called from his station, "the Valdran flagship is signaling surrender." Nicole felt relief wash over her. The killing could finally stop. She activated the communications channel and heard Emperor Threvkor's voice, cold and defeated. "This is Emperor Threvkor of the Valdran Empire," he said formally. "I hereby surrender all forces under my command to human authority. I request terms in accordance with galactic law." "Surrender accepted," Nicole replied professionally. "All Valdran vessels will power down weapons and prepare for boarding by inspection teams. Any ship that fails to comply will be destroyed." The massive Valdran ships began shutting down their weapon systems one by one. It was humiliating for an empire that had never known defeat, but they had no choice. Humanity had proven superior in every way that mattered. On Earth, President Rebecca Walsh received confirmation of the surrender and felt tears of exhaustion and relief. 12 billion people had lived under the shadow of invasion for 3 months, and now it was over. She prepared to address the planet, but first she had calls to make. "Get me Ambassador Henderson at the Galactic Assembly," she told her communications staff. Kyle Henderson stood before the assembled delegates once again, but this time the atmosphere was completely different. Every species present had watched the Battle of Earth unfold through long-range sensors and independent observers. What they witnessed had shaken their understanding of galactic power. "Honored delegates," Kyle spoke into the hushed chamber. 3 months ago, the Valdran Empire attacked Earth with 3,000 warships. Today, they surrendered with less than 300 ships remaining. The silence was absolute. Species that had feared the Valdrans for generations now saw them broken by newcomers. Humanity did not seek this war. Kyle continued, "We came to this assembly seeking peace and cooperation. The Valdrans chose violence, and they have paid the price. But Earth takes no pleasure in this victory. We grieve for every life lost on both sides. A delegate from one of the Valdran client states stood and spoke with barely contained emotion. For 50 years, my people suffered under Valdran occupation. They took our resources and enslaved our children. Now you have broken them in 3 months. How? Kyle considered his answer carefully. We survived. That's what humans do. We survive. He pulled up a holographic display showing Earth, the blue and green world that humanity called home. This planet tried to kill us for millions of years. Kyle explained. Ice ages that lasted thousands of generations, volcanic eruptions that blotted out the sun, asteroid impacts that caused mass extinctions, diseases that killed billions, and every time we adapted and survived. The delegates listened with growing understanding. The Valdrans assumed we were weak because our technology was primitive. Kyle continued. But strength isn't just about weapons and ships. It's about will and determination. It's about refusing to quit even when everything seems hopeless. Humanity learned that lesson over millions of years on a death world. Dr. Amy Carson stood beside Kyle and activated her research data. Earth's gravity is higher than 70% of inhabited worlds. Our atmosphere has higher oxygen content, which allows for greater energy production. Our evolutionary history created persistence hunters who could track prey for days without rest. She pulled up comparative biological data. Human reaction times are faster than most species because we evolved as both predator and prey. Our pain tolerance is extreme because our ancestors who couldn't handle injury didn't survive. Our capacity for violence is matched only by our capacity for cooperation. The assembly processed this information, and many delegates felt uncomfortable. They had welcomed humanity to the galactic community while knowing nothing about what humans really were. A delegate from the Terrellian Confederacy spoke up. If humans are this formidable, why did you not reveal this earlier? Kyle smiled sadly. Because we hoped we wouldn't need to humanity. Genuinely wanted peace. We still want peace, but we will never accept subjugation. The Valdrans forced us to show what we're capable of when threatened. Admiral Krevnos was brought before the assembly in restraints. The Valdran officer who had commanded the initial attacks looked diminished and defeated. Kyle invited him to speak. I underestimated them. Krevnos said simply, we all did. The humans fought with tactics we couldn't predict and determination. We couldn't break every time. We adapted. They had already moved to counter us. It was like fighting an enemy that could read our minds. Not mind reading. Brandon Wright spoke from the audience section. Just pattern recognition. The Valdran military hadn't changed tactics in centuries because they never needed to. Humanity has thousands of years of military history with constant innovation. We've fought each other in every environment imaginable. He stood and moved to join Kyle at the central platform. We studied your species for months before this war began. Brandon explained. We analyzed every battle record we could access. We identified weaknesses in your doctrine and designed our tactics to exploit them. The Valdrans thought they were fighting primitives, but they were actually fighting a species that turned warfare into an art form out of necessity. The assembly began to understand the full scope of their miscalculation. Humanity wasn't just another species. They were survivors from a world so harsh it forged them into natural warriors. President Rebecca Walsh's image appeared on the main display, addressing the assembly remotely. Earth proposes the following terms for the Valdran surrender. The Empire will be dissolved and its client states granted independence. Emperor Thravker will face trial for crimes against sentient beings. All Valdran military forces will be reduced to defensive levels only. She paused, and her expression softened slightly. However, humanity will assist in the economic reconstruction of Valdran worlds. We will share technology to help them transition to peaceful society. We will not impose occupation or extract punitive reparations beyond what is necessary for victim compensation. The Valdran delegates looked shocked. They had expected destruction and instead were being offered mercy. Why? One Valdran representative asked in confusion. Why show us compassion after what we did? Rebecca met their gaze through the holographic display. Because humanity understands what it means to suffer. We know what it's like to struggle and survive. We won this war, but we don't want to perpetuate cycles of violence. We want to build a galaxy where species cooperate instead of conquer. Kyle took over the presentation. Earth formally applies for full membership in the Galactic Assembly. We offer our unique perspectives and capabilities to serve the common good. We hope to build alliances based on mutual respect rather than fear. The vote was called immediately. Every delegate present understood that refusing humanity now would be both foolish and dangerous. The motion passed unanimously. Over the following weeks, the implications rippled across known space. Dozens of aggressive empires reconsidered their expansion plans after witnessing the Valdran collapse. The balance of galactic power shifted as species realized that military might alone didn't guarantee victory. Ashley Morgan returned to Earth as a decorated war hero. She had survived over 50 combat missions and destroyed 3 capital ships. But the victory felt hollow because her sister,